Welcome to the Sydney Catholic Schools Term 4 Family Forum, where we'll be focusing on the road back to face-to-face learning for our primary schools across metropolitan Sydney. My name is Tony Farley and I'm the Executive Director of Sydney Catholic Schools. And co-presenting with me tonight is Dr. Jacqueline Frost, who is our Chief of Staff. Jacqueline.
Thanks, Tony. We'll begin this evening with a prayer and acknowledgement of country. And it's been provided to us tonight by the students at St Mary's St Joseph, Maroubra.
We would like to acknowledge the Bidjigal and Gadigal clans who traditionally occupy the Sydney coast and pay our respects to the elders past and present, for they hold the memories, traditions, the culture and hopes of Aboriginal Australia. We must always remember that under this concrete and stone, this is and always has been traditional Aboriginal land.
I'd like to share our school prayer with you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Mary, our Mother, we offer you today everything we do and say. Help us to try to do our best and to have pride in our work and our school. We pray that we will always make a special effort to be cooperative, friendly and respectful towards everyone. Bless our parents, teachers, friends and all those people who work so hard for us. We pray that we will always bless with the strength and kindness to grow and live as children of God. Mary, Mother of God, pray for us. Joseph, patron at school, pray for us. Saint Mary of the Cross, pray for us. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
We're very aware that our parents and students are looking forward to returning to face-to-face learning, while also having many questions and concerns about how that will occur. Tonight's Family Forum is intended to answer at least some of those questions and leave you confident that the school leaders and teachers in your school have worked particularly hard to make sure the transition back is as smooth and easy as possible.
Well, with that in mind, we thought it might be helpful if we asked you, what is it that most concerns you about the return to school? On your screen, you'll see a live poll and you can choose any of the options that apply. So, what is it that most concerns you about the return? Are you worried that your child might be exposed to COVID at school? Is it that your child might not be able to participate in the activities that have been cancelled or changed? Are you worried that owing to exposures and changing circumstances that we'll be moving in and out of remote learning? Is it that your child will have trouble readjusting socially after the lockdown? Perhaps you're concerned that your child might be behind their classmates in their learning. Is it that your child might have trouble adjusting to the schedule and the rigour of school? Or perhaps you have no concerns and you're ready to go. So we're going to have a little bit of a look at the results as they're coming in, and people are popping them up. And straight off the bat, we can see things coming in. In particular, it seems, Tony, that one of the biggest concerns is about the potential exposure that might happen at school.
That's a really huge concern, and we're seeing that come out at 73, 74%. It's not as if these other areas are not concerns, but obviously with what's happening in the community and the shift back to face-to-face learning and the changes in the community, it's front and centre for parents.
I think absolutely, and especially on a day like today, where we start to see the restrictions that are easing in our communities and people are starting to get out and about, it's perfectly natural to be thinking, I want to know what that means in the classroom environment or in the school environment. So we're going to try and deal with some of these tonight and have a look.
That's the whole point of this evening. Tonight we'll be talking to educational experts about 4 key aspects of the transition back to school. How we manage the physical environment of our schools to make them as safe as possible. How we'll manage the academic transition of our students so that every child's academic progress is assessed and managed in the best way possible. How we manage the social transition of our students' return to school, and how you as families will have to adapt to the return to school while juggling your work and family responsibilities as well. So let's start with the physical environment, Jacqueline. You've been managing the COVID response for all 150 Sydney Catholic schools. We meet with our school leaders every week over Zoom, and much of that discussion, since the government first outlined its plan for return, has been about the provision of a safe environment for our staff and students and community. So, Jacqueline, with that in mind, What measures will be in place to ensure that our schools are as safe as possible?
Fantastic. And we can see from the poll tonight that's clearly a concern for parents. So our teachers, our staff and our school leaders in particular have been working exceptionally hard to detail out risk assessments that will structure the way that school returns. Now those risk assessments include many things. They of course include cleaning schedules, so high touch areas being more rigorously cleaned, making sure that areas like the bathrooms or areas where students are transiting have higher schedules of cleaning, We've got personal protective equipment. So when your students return, you'll see that all of the staff will be masked, both indoors and outdoors. We also have the recommendation for students to wear masks if they're comfortable to in the primary classroom. You'll see the things that we saw in COVID 1.0 in terms of lots of sanitizer and wipes being available and students being encouraged to do that as they come in and out of the classroom. The QR codes will continue so that we can track and make sure we know who's on the school site and we can identify anybody there. Also about being distanced as far as we possibly can. This is happening in the classroom but also between our staff and other people that are there. The final thing really, the piece of the puzzle is really around vaccination. So all of the staff that are back on our school site will be doubly vaccinated when they return to school.
Jacqueline, we hear a lot about ventilation in the media. It's all over the media and we're hearing about it in all sorts of schools. What are we doing in our 150 schools?
Well, this is one of those areas, Tony, where being a system like Sydney Catholic Schools that have quite a large property and facilities team really is a benefit because our team have been working extensively in this space. And the work that they've been doing is really about looking at what is the best way to get ventilation across the school site. So it was even in the media today, without a doubt, the best thing you can do is move outdoors. That's where the most fresh air is. So already we're seeing our schools start to think about how can they move lessons outdoors? What are some of the things that can be happening? How can they utilise some of those great playground spaces that they have for natural ventilation? The next best thing that you can do is about cross ventilation. So this is about making sure that our windows are operable, we've got doors open so that we can get that ventilation crossing through the classroom. So that's really important as well. And the team has been going in and out of schools over the last 6 weeks, making sure that that's possible. The third step is around checking the things that we already have in place. So looking at our fans and our air conditioning units, making sure filters are updated, that they're cleaned, and putting them on a really regular maintenance schedule. In addition, we are doing some additional things. So all of our schools will have handheld CO2 monitors, and that'll just be a tool that the schools can use to assess classrooms and different spaces to make sure that there is good airflow. And when there's not, we're going to have mobile air purification units, which will be able to be used in and around the school and moved into spaces as students are there to really maximise the ventilation.
So Jacqueline, there'll be some changes when our students come back. Could you take us through those?
Yeah, unfortunately there will be some changes. It won't look exactly as it did before we went into lockdown. And one of the things that might be most telling, particularly for our parents at home, is that we won't be able to have parents on site when we first return. And this is in terms of parent helpers, but also in terms of picking students up and dropping them off. So it'll be really about not being able to have any visitors on site who aren't essential to the curriculum. So that's one of the first changes that you'll see. You'll also see that schools are putting in place staggered drop-off and pick-up times. And again, this is about trying to limit that playground gathering because we know that's a high-risk activity. So where schools have pick-up lines, they're going to be trying to have parents stay in the car while they're picking students up to try and limit people having to cross each other's paths, essentially. The other thing that we've been working on, and all of schools across New South Wales are doing this, is what they call a cohort model, which essentially means that classes will be learning and playing together. So it's about keeping our students in consistent classes or in consistent year groups so that they're able to work across the board. And sometimes that might mean that the staff member who's delivering the classroom learning might not be the same classroom teacher as your student always has, but it's about making sure that we try and limit the mixing between student groups.
So we're talking about some of the changes. What will be happening when they come back to school?
Our primary school students are going to be very happy because the canteens will be open. So the canteens can be accessed by class groups at a time. They've got really strict cleaning schedules, and all of our canteen staff will be masked, but the canteens will be open. So will the libraries. So our students have probably really missed being able to borrow books and to get in and have their library lessons, so they'll be open. Some of those other things that we really enjoy when they're connected to the curriculum, like dance and drama, sport as classes, they'll be able to take place as well. Most of them will be done outdoors.
So there are some things that won't be happening. What are they?
Yeah, unfortunately, there are a number of activities that will be restricted. And really, the general rule is if it's a large activity, if it involves groups of students or students and adults, then it's probably not going to be going ahead. So when we first return, there won't be any assemblies, concerts, performances, excursions, camps, field trips. Unfortunately, sports and carnivals larger than a single class won't be taking place. And while all of our students love to sing and play in their bands and ensembles, unfortunately that won't be happening either.
Okay, so every single one of our schools has a site-specific safety plan. Tell us about those.
So the site-specific plans are really about trying to mitigate the impact of any potential exposure. So it's looking at what does the site look like, how much space do we have, and how can we, as far as possible, keep our students in these cohort models that limits the mixing in between each other. So it's about trying to make sure we don't have too many visitors on the school site, and most importantly, that students stay at home with even the mildest of symptoms. If students present with symptoms at school, then you will be asked to come and pick them up, and we ask that they don't come back to school until they've returned a negative COVID test. And all these things are about trying to limit any potential exposure.
The last area I think we just want to know about is, let's face it, COVID isn't going anywhere anytime soon. So what happens if there is an exposure on a school site?
Well, this is one of those unfortunately and fortunately. So over the last 18 months, we've had a little bit of practice about what happens if you have an exposure on a school site. And our school leaders and the people who work in our schools have just been exceptional in terms of how we manage that. So what can a parent expect if there is an exposure on your school site? The first thing is you'll get a letter, and the letter will explain to you when we think somebody might have been infectious at school. Essentially what it will do is it will put anybody who was potentially exposed into isolation while we undertake the contact tracing. And that's really important because what it does is it gives us time to liaise with New South Wales Health and make sure that we've identified anybody who might potentially have been exposed. Once that contact tracing takes place, then we issue a letter that explains exactly what you have to do if your child was a close or a casual contact and what that means for them. And fundamentally, what our schools have become great at is being able to move very quickly into remote learning. So that even though a school will be interrupted for a period, if there's a potential exposure, they won't be interrupted in their learning because their teachers are fantastic at being able to move the class to remote learning while we manage that.
Thanks, Jacqueline. That's an excellent and reassuring summary. As Jacqueline has outlined, our schools are using a carefully planned approach that places the health and safety of our students, staff and communities at the centre of everything we do. We understand that situations can change rapidly in these COVID times, and we're prepared to respond effectively no matter what the changes might be.
We are. As we saw in our first poll this evening, not only are our parents thinking about the safety of the environment, and that's clearly front of mind, but also one of the polls that rated quite highly there was thinking about any potentially lost learning time. Teaching is truly a specialty profession, and nothing can replace face-to-face direct contact with teachers in the classroom. A key part of the academic transition back to school will be assessing where students are at, their readiness to return to the classroom, which areas they have mastered while they've been learning from home, and which areas might need to be a focus for the remaining weeks of term. Now, to talk us through these issues tonight, we've invited Sydney Catholic Schools Director of Education and Research, Dr. Kate O'Brien, to answer some key questions. Good evening, Kate. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Jacqueline. It's a pleasure. I'm delighted to be here tonight.
Thanks. Look, maybe we could start. For parents, what sorts of things will teachers be doing to assess where students are at when they return?
So it's a very good question, and teachers have been preparing for this moment for a very long time. After 107 days of remote learning, they're very excited to have the students back. They're going to re-establish those relationships with the students, get to know them deeply. The things that they engaged in at home that worked really well for them, for their learning, and things that they found complex and difficult. The teachers will spend the time to re-establish those relationships, to attend to the social and emotional needs of students. Because first and foremost, this is a big change for students. And for those little ones in kindy and year one, they've missed a lot of school and they'll be a little bit anxious. So celebrating the great things that kids can do, children will do every single day, will be first and foremost in the assessment process for teachers.
Fantastic. So, Kate, will there be particular areas of the curriculum which will be a real focus when we come back, knowing we've got a limited amount of time then before the Christmas holidays?
This is something that we've put a lot of thought into and a lot of preparation. And we learnt last year from the COVID experience that when the children come back to school, it's very important to have a detailed and systematic plan around reading and writing, mathematics, and around social and emotional development. And schools are already prepared in this space. We've worked with our specialist teachers across Sydney Catholic schools, which we are so fortunate to have so many in all of our schools, to focus on what will small group reading and writing and mathematics look like to ensure that the teachers know and understand where every child's learning is at and can help develop the plan to celebrate what they know and also develop where they need to go next.
Fantastic. And I heard you mention there about instructional specialists. That's a model that Education and Research have brought in, and that's continuing into next year and will really help this. Is that right?
That's absolutely right. We've got currently have 50 instructional specialists in our primary schools in reading who particularly focus on developing teachers' capacity in reading, writing and in mathematics. We've also got trained mathematics teachers that have been engaged in a program over the last 3 years, and we will be increasing the number of instructional specialists next year to really focus on explicit teaching for our young learners in Sydney Catholic schools.
Fantastic. Look, for a parent who's sitting at home, how can they be assured that their student will be ready to progress to the next year of their education, the next stage of their learning?
Now, this is a question I've been asked in my own family with my children worried about the grandchildren going back to school and what they've missed. And I reiterate that they learn different things at different times, and the great joy that they've had at home with their family has meant that they've learnt things around being a family, family values, relationships, getting on with each other. In terms of the curriculum and the syllabus that the students learn each day, we have expert teachers in our schools who engage in high levels of professional development to ensure that they know the curriculum for the years before a child is in. Say they're in year 2, they know the kindy and year 1 curriculum, and they also know the year 3 and 4 curriculum, so that they can help on that continuum of learning where your child is at through the assessment practices. And they'll be spending a lot of time really understanding where each child is at in those key learning areas of English and mathematics, and working with the teachers for who the students will have next year, just to limit that holiday time that we're also looking forward to.
Perfect. I guess the final question then is really, what sorts of programs then might be in place for students who across our schools might come back to school and find they need a little bit of extra intervention?
Yeah, one of the things that we really benefited from last year when we returned to school was an explicit program for reading and writing in the early years, and we'll be extending that right across from K to 6 to ensure that our young children in small groups really focus on learning how to read and using reading to learn. And this is the expert teachers that we have will be supporting the students in that. Instructional specialists, our mathematical excellence teachers, our classroom teachers, our diverse learning teachers and our teachers of wellbeing have been preparing specialist programs to help not only the curriculum of English and mathematics and other areas, but also that of social and emotional development. We're putting all our resources of Sydney Catholic schools into supporting our students return to school and as getting back on track with learning as quickly as possible.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Kate.
Kate, we're very, very excited, sorry, Jacqueline, about the students coming back. Really excited. And I just want to say thank you to the parents at home for the wonderful work that they've done over the last 4 months in keeping their children motivated and excited about learning. And we're absolutely delighted to have them back.
Yeah, we can't wait. There's no doubt about it. Thanks, Kate. Kate's given us really an excellent insight into how our schools will manage the academic side of returning to school. And we really do understand that you might continue to have questions, and we want you to know that we're confident that our plan and approach will be a success.
Yeah, we really are excited, and that's across the system, and we can't emphasise that enough for parents. One of the things that's been most difficult to replicate in the remote learning environment has been the social aspect of school. Schools are fundamental to the building blocks of community, and being part of a class and a school is key to our emotional and social development. While social media and the digital world is part of our children's lives, nothing can replace the experience of being in the physical presence of others. The return to face-to-face learning will focus on how we reintegrate into the social fabric of the school community. To help us understand more about the social transition back to school, we've invited the principal of St Ambrose Catholic Primary School, Concord West, Linda McFadden, to discuss how this can be approached. Welcome, Linda. So, Linda, how will schools manage our students' social development upon return?
Well, Tony, as students return to school, there'll be a focus on re-establishing not only the routines of how we operate in a school environment, but also how we interact with each other. In many ways, it'll be what teachers do at the start of every school year. Because not only have our students been learning remotely, but they've also been in lockdown, which means that their interactions and connections with others have been severely limited. So schools will focus on clearly communicating and modelling those structures and social skills that our students have missed out on for the past 100+ days. Being really conscious that it's those things that are key to learning and also to being part of a community.
So, Linda, some students might feel a bit unsure or worried about returning to schools. How can parents address that?
Look, I think it's a very natural thing that there's going to be apprehension and for some anxiety about returning to school after being away for such a long time. With any unease that children have in any area, it's really important that we listen and get to the heart of what each worry is, then acknowledge that we understand it. From there, addressing each individual worry and focusing on what they have control over will be really, really important. I think too, giving them the reassurance that their families and their teachers are going to be there to support them every step of the way and instilling confidence in them. Aiming to switch the narrative to all the things that they're excited about in the return to school and, will direct them to a more helpful thought pattern.
Yeah, Linda, just on that, there's something a little more specific, and it's the media saturation that our younger students, and all our students, but particularly the young ones, they're amazing what they pick up, can be very overwhelming. All the talk about COVID. What can parents and schools do about that?
I think all the adults in children's lives have such an important role to play in this. Look, we've been through a very challenging time and children are far from immune from the worries and concerns around COVID. Our children are such barometers of the emotions of the adults around them. So it's really important that we monitor and actively manage the fixation on COVID, the media saturation, and our own concerns so that we don't inadvertently raise the anxiety levels of our children. And really, I think the very best approach will be to focus on this new phase that we find ourselves in with joy and optimism. I mean, hope and living life to the full are cornerstones of our faith. And if we use that as our starting point, we're really going to put our children in a very good position to start.
Linda, what about the students who have found remote learning very, very satisfying and it's really worked for them and they've liked the self-direction that's involved? How can we support those students coming back to the rigour and the routine of the school environment?
I think whether you're an adult or a child, transitioning back after a long period of time is going to take time to get back into the swing of things. It's undoubted. but there are ways that we can proactively work towards a positive approach. So beginning to re-establish firm routines, a really important one for primary school children's around bedtime, having enough sleep to approach each day. Really working in the next couple of weeks around fixed learning times and break times can really help students to adjust back to the rigours of school. And I think having your child involved in preparing for coming back to school, getting their uniform ready, packing their bags, all of those things can be really positive steps towards moving back to that transition in a positive way.
And Linda, finally, what about our students who are in Year 6? They're just finishing up their primary school years. They have 8 weeks left of primary school. How do we help them celebrate that important milestone?
It's always a big focus in primary schools and so difficult for us to say goodbye to our Year 6 students at the end of their journey in primary school. So schools will be really keen to maximise that last term that we have with our Year 6 students. There'll have to be a focus on the transition to high school and readiness for that new mode that they'll find themselves in. And also find ways that they can continue their leadership at school in a safe way. Schools are working together to plan innovative ways to help our Year 6 students to be able to look back on their journey in primary school in a positive way and find significant and safe ways for us to be able to farewell them at the end of the year.
Linda, thanks so much for that great advice. It's reassuring to hear a great school principal like Linda talk with real authority and sensitivity about how our schools care for and guide each and every student throughout their educational journey, and most particularly at this time.
Learning away from school certainly has been a challenge for the whole family. In fact, it's been an endeavour we've all undertaken. Parents juggling working from home while managing schooling at home as well. We understand that your child's remote learning was taking place while parents and carers may have been dealing with the very real pressures of job loss, family illness and possibly even separation. With all this in mind, the return to school will understandably be a transition for the whole family. Now, it's safe to say that the pressure of the morning hustle is well known in many families. Packing lunches, packing school bags, finding uniforms, getting out the door on time. These are things that we probably happily missed during lockdown. But getting back into a school day routine will be a challenge that the whole family will face together. So for our final speaker tonight, we're speaking with Peter Cranny, who is the principal of St Declan's Catholic Primary School at Penshurst, who's also a parent with students in our schools. Hi Peter, thanks for joining us this evening.
Hi Jacqueline, hi Tony. Yes, I'm definitely wearing 2 hats tonight. That is the principal here at St Declan's and also the dad of 3 girls who are recommencing face-to-face learning in the coming weeks. And just like the unique journey families went on throughout remote learning, we're expecting a whole range of emotions as students and families come back to school. We get a sense of this every Monday after a weekend and sometimes the first day after school holidays, but it'll only be amplified given the duration of remote learning. We're expecting some kids to bound back in, ready to reconnect with their mates and learn straight away, whereas others might be a little bit more apprehensive, and that's okay. We experience this all the time at schools and we're certainly ready for all kinds of emotions as students return. As school students support this, we're looking to facilitate some social connections to the kids, let them see their friends again, facilitate some kids who might be feeling a bit shy about this. For our younger ones especially, reacquainting them with their learning environments and the safety procedures that go along with them. The school routines and structures as well are very important for our younger ones. Whatever it might be, we really want our kids to be active involvement in their return to school journey and put their own stamp on what coming back to school looks like.
Absolutely. And I think as families return to school, we know it won't be a flick of a switch. We won't be easily able to just jump straight back into where we were 106 days ago, but it will really be a gradual transition. So how can families manage that?
Yeah, that gradual transition is fine. We're expecting, as I said, some students straight away, others might take a little bit longer, and that's fine. I think as families, we can support that by starting with a look back at what remote learning was like and really unpacking what some of the successes their children had during that. I'm a big believer that success leads to success. So in doing that, that should then give you the tools to look forward and what skills are they learn during remote learning that'll help them be successful as they come back. I'd hope that all families, and you would have done this in the past, I'm sure, but have a conversation with their child each night where you unpack the day, ask them what was good, ask them what challenged them and how they addressed it, what was successful and why were they successful? Those questions that are really important to the growth mindset we're trying to instill in all our kids. But whatever it might look like, be involved. We know that kids thrive when their parents are involved in their learning, and I can only encourage that to be a part of what it looks like when we come back to face-to-face.
Fantastic. I mean, I think that involvement in the learning is really the key. So what is it from the remote learning experience that will really enhance parents' participation moving forward? What can they take away and keep in place?
Well, one of the secret successes of remote learning was that it gave parents insight they wouldn't normally have into what their children are like as a learner. I know with my own 3 girls, they're very, very different types of learners. They're challenged by different things, they thrive in different scenarios, and they're motivated in different ways. Now, if we didn't have remote learning, I might not have found that out. So that knowledge that parents have acquired over the last 12 weeks, I encourage that to carry with them and to use as the child comes home each night, as they engage with the teachers, not only for the rest of this year, but also next year as they transition into their new grades. Schools really value the input of parents, and this remote learning journey would have given you a lot of information to be a real integral part of that journey. And also, just lastly, my own family, I know a lot of other families really enjoyed the time away from learning. So those going for walks as a family, doing some exercise together, playing the board games, doing some family activities, they're really important. I know my family loves some Pictionary and Jenga and all the rest of it. Don't stop that. Kids love that, families love that, and we're talking about not only the well-being of the student, but the well-being of the families as well.
Fantastic. Such an important point to finish on. And Peter's perspective there as both a parent and a principal has been really helpful. I have to say, as a working parent with a daughter in year 3 at one of our schools, Peter's comments were genuinely reassuring. We also love the Pictionary in my house.
Just before we finish, we thought we'd do one more poll, and we're interested in knowing what you'd like to know more about as we return to school. Once again on your screen, you can click the areas you would like to be featured in our future communications with you. And we've outlined COVID-safe measures, academic intervention programs, student wellbeing support, learner profiles and styles of learning, the positive lessons from at-home learning. Now, you might think if all of those are really important to you, or just a few, and we can see those results coming in already. Academic intervention programs are featuring very strongly at the moment, as are COVID-safe measures, as you would expect, and of course student wellbeing. I mean, that's a nice spread there in terms of what we're seeing.
Yeah, I think the most important thing there is really thinking about having the information really gives us the weapons that we need to be able to move into a time that still might feel a little bit uncertain for our parents. So we'll certainly be using that to structure some of our communications with you as we move into term 4.
Yeah, the point is that we really do use this data to inform what we do at the school level, but also at the system level. That's it for our Term 4 Family Forum. A special thanks to our guests who joined us tonight, Dr. Kate O'Brien, Linda McFadden and Peter Cranny. Thanks so much for watching and participating, and remember that if there's anything you'd like to know, your teacher and school principal are only a phone call away. There is a very short anonymous survey about this forum that will follow, and we would appreciate your feedback. Good night and God bless.